All right, so it's been a while since we spoke. To get back into the groove of things, we're at an old familiar stomping ground. Let me know if you guys recognize it. Right, so I've been missing for maybe around 2 weeks from YouTube, so I'm about to give you guys a quick rundown as to why that's the case. If you're not interested in hearing me rant, which of course I wouldn't blame you at all, skip to this timestamp for just poker hands. But if you want a few life updates, here we go. Right, so like I said, it's been a few weeks since you guys heard from me, and that's for good reason. I've been very busy with a lot going on. First and foremost, I moved from Beaumont to Orange County, Anaheim to be exact. If you guys aren't Southern California locals, all that means is that instead of being around an hour and a half away from all these LA casinos, I am now around 20 to 30 minutes away. Hopefully that results in a little bit of an easier process when it comes to making poker vlogs, in particular from the Los Angeles scene. Secondly, I got sick during the move. As far as I know, it wasn't COVID. I was feeling really bad for a few days, so that knocked me out for a little over 72 hours. And on top of that, I've been doing a few social things. I went to Morgan Wallen. If you guys don't know who that is, it's a popular country artist. And also A Day to Remember. Both of those bands, or rather groups I should say, one isn't necessarily a band, but anyway, both of those events were a lot of fun, and it's nice to get away from the constant work grind, which has sort of been the case for like the last year or so. So I also took some personal time off to enjoy with family, friends, and Megan. So anyway, you know, a lot's been going on, and that's the reason why these vlogs haven't been coming out in such a timely manner. But hopefully now we're all settled in, ready to get this show back on the road. Also, before I forget, I was on the Nick Vertucci podcast. If you guys don't know, Nick Vertucci is one of the owners of Hustler Casino Live. He started a podcast a few months ago and invited me on as a guest, which was a lot of fun. If you guys want to check out that interview, or whatever you want to call it, here's the link for that. You can also find it down below. And lastly, I got scheduled to play on Hustler Casino Live next week, October 12th and 13th. I believe it's a Wednesday and Thursday. So if you guys are interested in that, check out those streams coming up. And if not, I'll recap all those interesting hands on the next video as per usual. But anyway, that's everything that's been going on, I think. By the way, if you guys want to see the inside of that new apartment I got in Anaheim, if there's any interest for that, let me know down in the comments, and maybe next vlog I'll take you guys around. But all that being said, I am here today at the Bicycle Casino for no special occasion besides just getting back into poker. This is the longest I've ever gone without playing poker since I started. I believe it's been 16 or 17 days. For myself, that's a really long break. And, you know, I just wanted to get back into it. Instead of jumping right back into the high stakes streams next week at Hustler, I figured, why don't I come play some 5-10, hopefully 5-10-20, and, you know, just dip my feet back in the water. So yeah, today's not going to be anything super crazy, just some mid stakes. Hopefully it goes well. That's enough talking. Let's get in there, play some cards. All right, guys, here we go once again, this time playing 5-10 at the Bicycle Casino. Max buy-in for this game is 3,000, so that's what I sit with. And in the first interesting hand, there's two limpers, one from late position, the other from the button. And I look down at a small to medium pocket pair in the small blind pocket sixes. I think you could make a case for just calling, but I decide to raise it up, make it 75 to go. Big blind in late position fold, but the button, who was the second limper, comes along. So we're going to go heads up to a flop out of position of ace, queen, 5 with 2 hearts. Obviously not great for my exact hand, but on a board like this, as the pre-flop raiser, I'd want to be betting small with a ton of holdings, this one included, so that's what I do, $50, and my opponent makes the call. Turn is interesting. It's the 6 of hearts, so it gives me a set, but it brings in the most obvious draw, which is the flush. I decide to check, much like I would with most of my hands, and this time my opponent bets himself $150. I don't really think check raising makes a ton of sense, although I could see the merit behind it, but I decide to play a little more standard and just call, obviously looking for a board pair on the river. That would be quite nice, but it's not what we get. It's the 10 of clubs, so no improvement to my hand. I check it again, and this time he bets $400. Not a very fun situation. Now, I think it's easy to just, say we've got a set, I'm not going to fold and toss in the money. But against this particular player, based on what I'd seen and the type of player I think he is, I almost instinctively ruled out bluffing altogether. Obviously not 100% certain, but that was my read at the time. So now it's just a question of, do we beat enough value bets? And I don't really think we do. Even though I have a pretty strong hand, I doubt he would have 2 pair as a value bet here. Maybe, but most likely he's just got a flush. So after a little while, I decide to make a very disciplined fold. Not something I'd do against most players, but like I said, this particular guy, I just didn't have a good feeling about it. And the longer the day went on, the better I felt about this fold because he didn't really play any hands after this. So we'll never know, but I end up letting this one go. In the next interesting one, I open Jack 10 of diamonds from middle position to $40 and get one caller before the button raises it up to $160. Action's back on me, and I think folding is totally fine, but I decide to call. The player on my left folds. Flop is decent. It's Jack 6-4 with 2 hearts, so we've got top pair, but naturally I'm going to check it over to the pre-flop raiser, and he checks it back. Turn is the 7 of diamonds. Now this is a board that favors me a lot more than him, so I think betting small with a lot of hands makes sense, both bluffs, value bets, and hands like my own, which is top pair, not necessarily betting for value, more so for protection and, like I said, board coverage. So I lead for $120, and he lets it go. I think this hand is a good example of the fact that people at these somewhat lower stakes don't really check over pairs as often as they should. Seems like when they have something they bet, when they don't have something they check. Pretty straightforward stuff. Anyway, in the next one, the straddle is on, and I look down at Jack 4 of diamonds from middle position. Obviously a questionable open, but I do raise it up here to $50 and get called by the button, small blind, and straddle. So 4 ways to a flop of 10-8-4 with 3 hearts. Action checks to me, and in case it wasn't apparent enough already, this table is pretty passive, so I'm just going to continue betting. I think good things can happen across multiple runouts, and I've got bottom pair, which is a little something. So I put in $75. Button and small blind fold, but the straddle calls. So just 2 of us go into a turn, which is the deuce of diamonds. He checks it over to me again, and now I'm just going to continue betting. Like I said, I don't think he's going to be super strong on a board like this, so I put in $200. And after a long think, he turns over the 10 of diamonds and folds. So a very good result. And we take it down with bottom pair. Well, I guess it's not bottom pair anymore, but you get the idea. In the next interesting hand, straddle is on once again, this time from yours truly. There's an open from middle position to $70. Big blind calls, and I look down at ace jack offsuit in the straddle. With the big blind calling and having a big ace, I think this is a good candidate to squeeze with, so that's what I do, making it $400 to go. The initial raiser calls, but the big blind folds, so we're going to go heads up to a flop of king jack 10 all spades. Interesting board here, as we've got a straight draw and middle pair, but not much else aside from that. For that reason, I think checking is fine, but this is usually a board where I want to bet a lot of hands, so this time I decide to bet small, $250, and my opponent makes the call. Turn card is the 10 of diamonds, and now I think it's a spot where we can start to split our strategy. My hand in particular is a little bit too strong to start bluffing with, but it's definitely not strong enough to bet for value, so I check it, and my opponent checks it back. Feeling decent about the hand now, and especially so when the river comes to the 5 of hearts. Still, I don't see any merit to betting, so I check it, and he checks it back while showing pocket 9s, no spade. Pretty optimistic call on his end on the flop, but I'm happy to take it down. Next, the straddle is on yet again. Early position opens to 60, middle position calls, and I'm in late position with king jack offsuit. Usually a hand that you can totally fold against an early position open, but I was feeling a little bit frisky on this night, and this particular player had just won a really big pot, and I had the impression that he was not very comfortable with so many chips in front of him. So I decided to embark on an adventure here by raising it up to $260. The initial raiser thinks for a while and calls, as does the middle position player. So 3 of us are going to go to a flop of 9-7-4 rainbow. somewhat neutral board. I think they could have a set sometimes, but for the most part, I'm going to have stronger hands than they are, and that's still the case on a board like this. So when it checks to me, I continue with a bet of $325, just planning to apply pressure across multiple streets. Initial raiser calls, but middle position folds. I think it's worth noting that when a player calls and there's someone left to act behind who could also call or even raise, they're generally going to be a little bit stronger than if they were calling as last to act or closing the action, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm keeping that in mind as we go to a turn, which is the 4 of diamonds, pairing the bottom card. I think it's a good one for me to continue betting. So when he checks, I decide that I am not going to give up, but instead apply as much torque as we can here. He's only got around $900 behind. That's the only problem. But I think he could still have hands like ace-9 suited, pocket 10s, pocket 8s, maybe a hand like 10-9 suited. All these different holdings that I think will have a very hard time hanging on. So after a little bit of thinking, I decide to rip it all in there. And we don't get snap calls, so that's very good. In fact, we get the opposite of a snap call as my opponent goes in the tank for probably one of the longest time periods I can think of. It must have been over 6 or 7 minutes. Honestly, a little bit surprising that he didn't get the clock called on him sooner, but someone does eventually call the clock. Floor comes over, and now we just have to wait 60 seconds. If he doesn't act, his hand is dead. And as the time winds down to the final 10 seconds, he decides to call. So that's not good news, but there is always plan B, which was to hit a king or a jack on the river. 6 outs. That's nothing to scoff at. Unfortunately, that's not what happens as it comes to 3 of clubs. I let him know he's good, and he flips over pocket 10s. Seems like a straightforward hand, but yeah, this one doesn't go our way. And of course, we easily could have avoided this situation altogether by not playing such a questionable hand pre-flop, but such is the nature of doing things like that. You're either going to win these fun pots or you're going to lose big ones. In this case, it does not go my way. But the night goes on. In this next one, there's a middle position open to 30, and I'm in the small blind with ace-10 suited. Definitely a raising candidate, so I kick it up to 130. Normally would go a bit bigger, but this opponent in particular did not have much in his stack, I think around 1,000. So he makes the call, and we're going to go heads up to a flop of queen, queen 5 with a club. Generally a good board for the pre-flop re-raiser when there's 2 big cards out there that are paired. So I continue with a small bet, and he makes the call. Turn card is even better. It's the king of diamonds. Well, I guess it could definitely be better since I still just have ace high, but you guys get the idea. It's generally going to favor me, so I see no reason to slow down. This time, $280 are going into the middle. Now I expect all sorts of pocket pairs or hands that flow to the flop to just let it go. But he calls again. Now I think it's apparent he's actually got something. So when the river comes to 6 of hearts, he's only got around, I don't know, maybe $800 behind, and I'm not interested in going for it in this particular spot. So I check it, waving the white flag. He bets some amount, I think around $500, and I release right away. Moving right along, in this next one, the straddle is on, and I open an early position to $50 with ace queen. Small blind calls, as does the straddler. So we're going to go 3 ways to a flop of jack, 7, 5, rainbow. Small blind checks, and interestingly enough, the straddle leads out for $50. This generally isn't going to be a hand that's very strong. Usually if people flop a set or 2 pair, they try to go for a check raise or play a little more slowly, spring the trap. You guys know what I mean. So I think this is more indicative of either a draw or perhaps top pair. So with those things in mind, I decide to do something pretty unorthodox and attack this with a raise. Make it $150 to go. This isn't exactly recommended, but that was my thought process real time. Small blind folds, and now this is where the hand gets interesting, as the straddler elects to 3-bet the flop to $450. And now, as weird as it seems, I think it's very obvious that my opponent is bluffing, especially this player in particular, based on what I've seen so far and just the impression he gave me when he sat at the table. I had the feeling that he might try to own me in a hand or 2, and I think it's happening right now. If he had a set or a top pair hand, re-raising again makes no sense. So we are beating draws in pretty much all bluffs. So I decide to call in position. Like I said, this hand is not exactly standard and perhaps not even recommended, but I'm just telling the story. Turn is a very good card. It's the 7 of diamonds, making it even less likely that we possibly are up against a hand like a set or 2 pair. Although that wasn't exactly what I was expecting. You know, this is a welcome sight for sure. And now he bets $500. Against this particular sizing, I'm not feeling very good about it. I feel like he would go a bit bigger if he was still bluffing, but I had a very strong read on the flop that this opponent was getting out of line, so I decide to float yet again, looking for a brick on the river, and that's not what we get. It's the 10 of hearts. So now a hand like 8-9, which was a double gut shot on the flop, improves to a straight. But aside from that, it shouldn't really change much. I guess he could have a hand like 10-9 or 10-8, hands that improve to second pair on the river. But when he jams $1,500 all in, I strongly doubt he would do that with second pair. I suspect if he was bluffing and ended up rivering a pair, he'd probably check since he's got some showdown value now. Not much, but enough to induce a check, I believe. So when he jams all in, it's definitely an odd hand and probably not my proudest one, but we've come this far and we don't have to be right super often to make this call profitable. So I think it over for a little bit. Still think he could have hands like 8-6 suited, 6-4 suited, other gut shots, you know, things of that nature. All that to say that after a brief moment, I decide to call. Not feeling amazing about it, but we get some music to my ears as my opponent says, "You're good." Very good feeling when you call with ace high and that's what your opponent says. So I flash him the 8 high and he turns over 5-3 offsuit. That's right. My opponent's got bottom pair, which definitely beats my no pair. And we end up losing this one. So not exactly what I was hoping for. And that, of course, is the major problem with getting fancy. Sometimes you could even lose to hands that your opponents are bluffing with. Always a terrible feeling and usually an indicator that you perhaps did something wrong, which of course I think you can certainly argue I did in this hand, getting a little carried away with the ace queen high. Hope you guys understand my reasoning, but yeah, not the best hand, and now it's time to reload as we're down a good amount of money. Silver lining, though, is that we now get moved to the main game where the straddle was permanent, so we are now playing 5-10-20. I've got some more chips in front of me at this point. We're going to start this one off with a good hand, much better than ace-queen high. Pocket kings. Even better news is that there's a middle position open to $70, so I'm going to go ahead and re-raise, make it $270. But when it gets back to the middle position player who made it 70 to begin with, he decides to raise yet again, this time $1,000. Always a welcome sight when you've got pocket kings. Of course, there's, you know, that slight possibility that you're up against aces, but for the most part, pocket kings are going to be the best hand almost always. The question here is whether to just call and play in position or rip it all in there. My opponent's got around $2,500 remaining after this $1,000 raise. So I think both are totally fine, but this time I decide to just keep it normal and rip it all in there. Just like I would if I had a bluff such as, I don't know, ace-jack offsuit, ace-5 suited some of the time, you know, the occasional bluffs trying to get folds from better aces and such. But of course, this time I am not bluffing as I've got a very good hand, but not feeling too great about it when my opponent snap calls. Not looking good. I think it's obvious now that we're up against the dreaded pocket aces. Sure enough, the board comes all low cards, and that's what my opponent turns over. So we're going to be losing another big one here right when we move to the main game. And tonight is going from bad to worse. Let's see if we can turn it around in this next hand. At this point, the game has been converted to a 10-20, occasional 10-20-40, which is good news for me. I add on some more money, hoping things turn around. Let's see if we can do that in this hand. There's a late position open to $110, and I'm in the straddle looking down at ace-king. Another set of powerful cards, so I'm going to go ahead and raise it up, make it $550. And only the pre-flop raiser makes the call. So we're going to go heads up out of position to a very good flop of king 7 deuce rainbow. No reason to not bet this board, so I put in $300, just like I would with all my hands. My opponent makes the call. Turn card is the jack of clubs. Once again, I see no reason not to bet. This time I put in $1,250. My opponent makes the call again, so it seems like he's definitely got something, either a worse king, maybe the same hand, and of course we could be up against some better hands. King Jack suited seems very unlikely as there's only one possible combination left, and sets also don't seem super likely. I feel like this guy would fold pocket deuces and maybe even pocket sevens to a re-raise pre-flop, but anyway, I've actually got something and I don't have a very good image, so I'm just going to continue getting some value now that I actually do have it. River comes off a very good one. It's the deuce of diamonds, and my opponent's got around $3,500 behind. Less than a pot size shove, so that's of course what I'm going to do, looking to get called by a worse king or perhaps even some non-believing pocket pairs such as queens or tens. I announce all in and we get snap called. Not feeling too great when that happens, and sure enough, my opponent is quick to turn over pocket jacks for a turn set. Very rough night so far, and things are just getting worse as we now lose the biggest pot of the session, over $11,000 going in the wrong direction. Feeling a little discouraged now, but nothing to do except play on. Well, I guess you could make the argument that we could just leave, but I was still not feeling too upset, so the night goes on. This one, the button limps, and I check the straddle with ace-9 offsuit. Fine top pair on ace-king 3. I check it to him, he checks it back. Turn is a 10 of spades. I decide to bet for some value now, $75. My opponent makes the call. And the river is a good one. It's the ace of hearts, giving me 3 of a kind, and of course making it less likely I've actually got something. For that reason, paired with the fact that my image is complete garbage at this point since I've done nothing but bleed chips since I've sat down, I decide to bet over double the size of the pot, $600. And not too surprisingly, we do end up getting called. I turn it over and we win, so not a massive pot or anything, but it's nice that some chips are going in this direction. And that brings us to this next hand where there's a middle position open to 60, and I'm in the big blind with 10-5 of hearts. I toss in the call and we go to a flop of king 10-6 with 1 heart. So we've got middle pair and a potential backdoor flush draw. Action checks to the pre-flop raiser, who continues with 1/3 the size of the pot, $60. Big blind calls, and with someone betting and someone else calling on this board, I think it's totally fine to just let it go. Seems likely we're already beat, but I think calling is also fine just because a backdoor flush would be very disguised and very valuable, as well as a 10 could also give us some very good results, of course. And that's what we get after making the call. It's the 10 of clubs. Now we've got 3 of a kind and most likely the best hand. Big blind checks, and I think leading out on this card makes sense. This is usually a card that I would lead with all sorts of bluffs, so actually having it is certainly nice. I put in $100. Looking back, I wish I went a little bit bigger, but I think it's totally fine. Initial raiser calls, and the big blind calls again, so we get some action now that we finally have a strong hand, but we don't get a great river. It's the ace of diamonds, so now we're losing to hands such as pocket kings. Well, I guess we were already behind that hand, but now we're also losing to pocket aces, and of course the most obvious draw on the flop, which is queen jack for an open-ended straight draw. Big blind checks again. This time I decide to check, and the initial raiser does not. He bets $350. Big blind calls the $350, and now it's back on me. I'm getting a really good price, and I've got a very good hand, but if I'm being honest with myself, I just don't think I have the best hand. I think it's most likely we're beat by the initial raiser with a hand like aces, kings, or perhaps sixes, queen jack, all sorts of stuff. I guess it's possible he could have a hand like ace king, betting for value, and we do beat that, but doesn't seem too likely. So despite the night not going very well, I decide to stay disciplined and let it go. Could make a case for turning my hand into a bluff, but I don't think it's necessarily going to work given how, like I said, my image is at this point. So I decide to make a frustrated fold, but we do get some good news as the middle position player shows queen jack offsuit and the big blind mucks. So we make the correct fold. Always nice to do that even when you're getting whacked. And sadly, that brings us to the end of the session. I did play another 2 hours, but I was just card dead. I won a few small pods, lost a few small pods, nothing too interesting. So with that, we're signing off tonight. As always, I hope you guys enjoy the hands. So what was supposed to be a pretty chill night ended up becoming, I guess, kind of a tutorial on how to get your ass kicked at 5'10". Granted, it did turn into a 10-20, sometimes 10-20-40 later on, but nevertheless, things did not go very well for me. I think that was very obvious on most of the hands. I feel like I ran bad, I played bad, I felt bad. It just was not a great night. But even despite all that, I was still kind of enjoying myself. It's been a long time since I played poker, and I kind of forgot how fun the game is. So still trying to keep things in perspective. It's a good thing that I'm healthy and I have a chance to play cards on a Saturday night here in Southern California. Life could definitely be worse. That being said, it could also be better because I ended up losing around $9,000, maybe $8,000. I don't even actually really know. Results right here as always. Yeah, not a very welcome back to the tables, but that's how it goes sometimes, and at least we got this out of the way before next week, where I'm going to be playing higher stakes on Hustler Live. If we have sessions like this one, on those upcoming sessions, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So hopefully things go better next week. If not, at least it'll be content, I guess. But anyway, that's it for tonight, guys. As always, thank you for watching. Thanks for the support. Happy to be back, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.